Hello, I'm Nicholas the EE, that's Elemental Ember if you didn't know. Okay, so today I want to talk about... Basically, I saw a lot of conversation going on between two parties. One commenting about Digimon Adventure, and the other one commenting about the reboot. You know, one saying that one's better than the other saying that they prefer Adventure, well, you know, yada yada and all that mess. But then I saw something that actually was kind of interesting. What about a reboot of Digimon the Movie? You know, the original iconic film from Japan that was edited massively into two smaller... Was it two? Well, no, I think it was one smaller movie and then two larger movies for the thing of it. But yeah, it's been a while since I've watched it, honestly. But there are scenes that I love to just rewatch. But yeah, I mean, a Digimon movie was really cool, and a reboot would be just as interesting. But then I saw comments where people were dissing the original Digimon movie, you know, making fun of it, saying it was a joke, like, you know, a destroyed version of the original. And yeah, sure, it may have been snipped and cut and had a lot of things tossed out, but you do have to remember that Japan and America have two completely different, you know, ways of looking at it when it comes to films, even animated. They can't always let things through, and they have to be careful what they show. Well, at least they believed that they had to be careful of what they showed to children at the time. And of course, stuff was edited out that they weren't allowed to, you know, they either couldn't keep or they felt that they shouldn't keep. And yeah, sure, it split a massive film into a much smaller entity with a lot of stuff cut out, but what we were left with was still not bad. Now, I mean, I've watched both, and yes, the original Digimon the Movie in Japanese is amazing. I mean, there is definitely a lot cut out, and there's a lot to say about it, which is something I'm not going to do in this video, because not the point right now. But at the same point, comments specifically that I saw kind of annoyed me. And here's why. So specifically they stated that because Digimon the Movie, the US version, was, you know, cut up and essentially a destroyed, terrible version of the original in Japan. I mean, yeah, sure, it was not the same, but people were saying, like, oh, I feel bad for people who grew up with the US version. I'm sorry. This was before computers were, like, amazing. This was 2001 that Digimon the Movie came out. The US version came out, I believe, or both, or one or the other, either way. But either way, it was around 2001, I think February or something like that. How can you comment that you feel bad for the people who grew up with one variant of it when there was no other way for us to grow up with the other variant? I would have been happy to have been able to watch both as a child and, you know, form my own proper opinion at that point, but I didn't. I got stuck because the US version was, you know, shown on television. And then I bought it on video cassette and then later on DVD. It was the only thing I had. When it came to that, I couldn't go online and watch the other version. So these comments made no sense. And these people are from a variety of English-speaking countries who specifically themselves would not have been capable, not unless they had, I don't know, a family member who pirated copies, who went to other countries and got them and brought them for them to watch. Otherwise, there was no way or unless they went to Japan and found it and watched it there. These comments make no sense because they're basically saying, oh, well, because I've seen it now and I've seen the better version, as they call it. I mean, it's not. They both have their own ups and downs to it, but there's more downs to the American one because there's a lot missing out of it that wasn't the original. But again, it comes to the whole point of language barriers and so much more, and it annoys the hell out of me that people can stand or sit there and type away saying, oh, I feel bad. How can you say you feel bad when you were probably one of them? Or you just weren't a Digimon fan until it was marginally relatable. You were able to go and watch these things online because we had access to the World Wide Web when we weren't constantly having to listen to all the time for like 5 minutes and then finally getting on and watching something only for suddenly a phone call to come in and, oh, look at that, I'm no longer connected to the internet. Yes, because dial-up was a thing back then, and my god, I hated it. The noises were so irritating and frustrating. At one point when I first heard it, I'm pretty sure I believed the computer was about to break because I thought it was the computer making the noises, not the internet. So yeah. Either way, I find it frustrating that people are commenting this stuff as if they're any better than someone else because either they began with Digimon during the era of the World Wide Web, after it came out back when the internet was still pretty new. I mean, 2001 is barely a year, especially February, is barely a year after the whole Y2K mess where people believed that computers and such were going to come along and someone was going to get killed by their toaster. You're talking about a film that came out in that era, in that time where it had only just been a year after people were freaking out thinking things like that. Of course there are still people who probably think like that and won't go anywhere near technology, but still part of the point. People, they're not being honest with their feelings. I loved Digimon the Movie, and I also loved the original Japanese version. They were both great, but I grew up with the American version because it was the one that was more accessible worldwide, to say anything about it, and or at least, you know, it was accessible to me in the UK. And people just hate on things just because of so many stupid reasons. I liked the voice acting. You know, they actually did a good job in voice acting back then. Nowadays, it's always seemingly the same, especially when it comes to the Japanese versions of anime. It's always the same voice actors. You know, you always hear familiar voices and such like that, and it's like, oh, hey, look at that. I mean, like with, what's it called? Eden Zero. Yeah, it's basically a space version of Fairy Tail. A lot of the characters are very reminiscent and similar to characters from Fairy Tail because, again, same artist, same yada 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 yada. But the voice actors are also the same, but at the same point, they could have made the choice to pick different voice actors, you know, make it seem a little more different. But then also there are other anime where there are voice actors that have been very prominent for years, that are in One Piece, that are in Fairy Tail, that are in Bleach, that are in so on and so forth. They're now in Japan, I feel, is that there are not enough voices for characters. Like, there are characters that deserve a little bit more when it comes to voice acting, and we are stuck with the same group. It's like in a lot of superhero films, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is in them, and I'm like, I'm sick and tired of seeing him. I mean, great actor and such, but I don't want to see him in every single bloody film. It's like in the reboot. I don't want to see Tai in every single episode after the main story part where they finally defeat Millennium Mod. Spoilers, by the way. I should have mentioned that before, right? I didn't realize I was going to go into that one. You know, it's like saying is you get bored of certain characters if you see them too much. I mean, sure, it's like, oh, but it's the main character, you know, yada yada. Digimon, it's not supposed to have a main character. It's supposed to have main characters. Okay? Having one appear in every single episode that's supposed to be in a wide span of areas at different times and whatnot, I mean, it just barely makes the cut for anything. And honestly, it's why I dislike the second part to the Digimon reboot. Because the original Digimon Adventure, they never made that mistake. You know, making it seem like one character was everywhere at the same time. They actually split the characters up during the different seasons within it, and that where before Kari, during Kari, and whatnot. I'm not going to say after Kari because she continued into season 2, because there isn't an after Kari. Like when season 3 came out, it was a nice throwback to hear Kari's character's voice. Kari, the voice actor for Kari, in it again, because it was like bring back towards the original Digimon, and it's like, okay, so we still know it's going strong, still thinking that. It was great. The US does a lot better when it comes to voice acting, and that because it did back then, because back then, you know, they actually thought about the characters. They looked for the right kind of voices and whatnot. And sure, some of the jokes were stupid and corny and whatnot, but that was back then. That was 2001. That was normal. Like, people complain about it now, but it's like you can't complain about source material that comes from 2001 and expect it to be relevant in 2020. Which, 2 decades later, things are never going to hold up. It's the same with Adam Sandler films. People constantly hating on them because it's like, oh, don't like the comedy nowadays. It's like, yes, because it was back during a time where the comedy was that good. Comedy nowadays is a joke. Sure, there are still some good, hilarious people out there that are comedians, but the golden age of comedy is stained by this horrible stupidity of the human race wanting to be individually identifiable as each individual within the human race itself. I mean, I could stupidly go up to someone who says that they're, I don't know, something, and say, okay, well, I identify as a god. I mean, I've authored my own stories, I've created my own worlds. Technically, to them, if I was in that world, if I was pulled into it, I would be a god, because I created that world. I have forged their creations and whatnot. I could identify as a god, not in the same of a religious god, but, you know, in the sense of I've created life, in a sense. You could also say that for multiple other reasons as well, like being a parent. Just people are too focused on the wrong thing, and I've made the joke multiple times. Even it's been another 3,000 years before we finally kick the bucket in the right direction and, you know, grow up. But yeah, my main point about this all is that we all have our own separate opinions, yes. But you have to remember that some people, when they grew up with those things from back then, yes, it's because they're old or older. I'm 29, going on 30 in, like, what, 7 months or so? Things age. Not everything's going to be as good as it was. I honestly was not a big fan of the Japanese music. I grew up in an era, in a time, in a country where metal and rock and roll were a damn good thing. I mean, I'm Going Digital was... I love that song still. I still listen to it. There, you know, hearing that version and whatnot, and that they aspired me more. Inspiration, I say, not aspiration, inspiration comes from so many different things. You can't be blinded by the fact that you like one thing over another. You have to take in everything. A true fan accepts everything, no matter what it is, whether it's good or bad. People say, oh, well, I don't like this, and then it's like, they're just a fan. If you want to call yourself the biggest fan or a really big fan, you need to be able to take in everything from the beginning and end and say to yourself, there are good points and there are bad points, but I love it because I love the series. And I do, as you can very clearly see in certain cases. If I can get my fingers right, that up there is an Angel Woman figure. That is an Imperial Digimon figure from the thing like that. Over here, right here, that is a Galamon Crimson Mode figurine. Over here, there are a variety of different things from the Angelon figurine that goes with the Angelon figurine to a bunch more of the figurines from the can't remember what the set is, Standard and Amplified series. I mean, hell, even right up at the top one here, that's that specific one of Alphamon, you know, the figurine one. Yeah. There are lots of things going on. I love Digimon as an all-encompassing. I've created, from Rookie to Mega, over 81 Digimon myself that are all fan-made. I've created different worlds and such, and based things around other things and that. I've enjoyed fan artwork other people have done, and disliked a lot of it as well. And I'm not going to say it like, you know, it's a fact or anything. But in my belief, I am probably one of the biggest fans of Digimon out there. I mean, I have a lot of the games, for Christ's sake, too. I have a PlayStation 1 in there with Digimon World, which I still enjoy. I like the Digimon games as well. I hate the fact we couldn't get some of them serialized in the US and the UK and in Europe. I have bought every single thing that I have access to. You can't see it, but over in this one here, if I can picture it, point right, yeah, there we go, yeah, there's multiple things from Digimon TCG, like the original stuff, the original card things, and so much more. A Digimon merchandise that I own, even Digimon Digivices. I'm sure other people probably have all these amazing collections and such too, and I'm just, you know, mouthing off about my own, but not everyone who collects things is a huge fan. A lot of people do it merely out of hype, and people who are fans purely because of hype aren't true fans, in my opinion, because you're only jumping on something merely because, you know, it's there and it's popular. You have no identity at that point. I liked it before it was cool, in the sense that that is a great saying that has existed for multiple decades, and it still sticks. And I could say that about a lot of other things as well. I just hope people will learn a little bit more, that they need to understand that we all come from different walks of life. We can't have always have, you know, been a part of everything. There will always be things that many thousands of people have missed out on. However, I think the one thing we can agree on is that the that with Angelina something or other mini film that was at the start of Digimon the Movie, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. We can all agree on that, at least. Alright, well, this is Nicholas the EE signing off. I hope you enjoy your day, your night, your whatever, and see you in the next video.